What's up guys, it's your boy Beard back with another game review, and boy do we have a banger on deck. Like Team Cherry, I've been gone a long time, but we're back discussing the recently released Holow Knight Silksong. Released across the board on console and PC, Holow Knight Silksong is the highly anticipated follow-up to Team Cherry's Paramount first entry Hollow Knight. It feels like we're in the face of gaming royalty as games of all genre rolled out the red carpet for Team Cherry's release. In a stacked year for Game of the Year, Silksong throws its hat in the ring, rivaling some of the biggest games and studios of the year with a remarkable entrance. Holow Knight Silksong follows the bug warrior Hornet after being captured from the Hollow Nest. Her captors bring her to a faraway kingdom of Farloom, a land ravaged by a silk plague that drives those infested by its weave to madness. Upon escaping, Hornet begins a dangerous pilgrimage to the city's peak known as the Citadel to confront her captors and learn the truth of her abduction. Supported by a colorful band of bugs to help her ascent, Hornet's battles uncover mysteries that connect Farloom and the Hollow Nest, her lineage, and the ancient beings of the world at large. Silksong's narrative is present up front, but its depth flourishes through exploration and scratching every inch of the meticulously crafted environment. Hornet is captured, Hornet follows the path of the pilgrim to gain an audience with her captors. This is the basic premise presented if you just go from point A to point B. But the secret sauce for Silksong is found in the very similar architecture as Hollow Knight. So much of its story is spun in its complex lore and the bugs who inhabit Farloom. While you might enjoy the story on the surface, your reward for the challenge will be a deeper understanding of the bugs that have came before Hornet and for those who follow. Silksong is hard as shit. There's just so much to get into, but it's just very important to me to mention the difficulty up front. This is such a classic gamer's game. There is no difficulty other than harder. Hollow Knight and now Silksong teach through punishment and pain. Full stop.
Stop it. Get some help.
If you're not ready to struggle or you're opposed to learning through failing, this is not the game for you. Going into Silksong, I expected my knowledge of Hollow Knight to help carry me a little bit. I expected some muscle memory to kick in, but while there's enough of Hollow Knight's DNA in Silksong, Hornet and this game feel worlds apart from Hollow Knight. Silksong borrows mechanically from the first Hollow Knight while expanding its avenues in a multitude of ways. The controls are the same, and the loop of progression is relatively similar. Hornet must seek out mask shards to upgrade health, silk spool pieces to expand her silk, and thus the ability to heal and use abilities. You have to seek out ingredients to upgrade the damage of your nail. Much of what you know carried into Silksong, down to an excellent character helping you see the areas you've visited by buying maps. Silksong definitely doesn't attempt to fix something that's not broken, but Hornet's skills, upgrades, abilities, crests, and tools really start to broaden the gap between Hollow Knight and Silksong. But Hornet herself feels fundamentally different from the Knight, all the way down to her bouncy sidestep when changing direction.
So beautiful.
Silksong maintains Hollow Knight's directional combat and injects a ton of fresh ideas and tool sets that makes each player's experience feel unique and offer a ton of variety. Hornet has a wide array of silk skills that she can learn throughout the game that are both combat and movement based, sometimes one and the same. These silk skills really start to expand when you augment them with the new crest system that determines essentially Hornet's stance. The crests found in the game are not all guaranteed. Many are completely optional and quite complicated to obtain, but their viability makes the time commitment to obtain them seem minimal. While charms would often extend nail reach, damage, quickness, and attacks, crests offer Hornet an entirely new way to strike and even maneuver as you see changes in your down strikes, dash attacks, and more. Crests alter the way that your attacks function, but their biggest departure from charms is rather than a point value system to your belt, your crest determines how much and what type of tools you can attach to them. Tweak it! Team Cherry looked at how people broke Hollow Knight with charms and limited the way that some of your tools interact, but gave us a wide variety of interchangeability that makes you really hone your play style, but that's not to say that things can't get busted. Separated by color schemes, most crests only allow 2 of each tool types under each color. Red tools are weapons and throwables, while yellow tools are utility like seeing Hornet on the map and collecting more shards on kills, while blue are a combination of mechanics and gameplay augments like faster running or quicker binding. There are some incredible combinations that made gameplay feel unique, and each tool really serves a purpose. One of my big critiques of the first Hollow Knight was there were maybe 5 or 10 charms out of the 33 that most people used because of their extreme viability. Hornet's movement techniques are really nice, and one of the best parts of Silksong is just moving through the environments. There are plenty of areas that require patience to see complex jumps through, but once you get the hang of your Crest and Hornet's maneuvers, whizzing through the area from frame to frame feels astounding. Putting that movement to work within boss fights feels equally exciting, but as much so harrowing. The number of nail-biting dashes, single-frame hits for both me and enemies, make stopping and fighting your 250 enemy feel just as fun as the first. I think a lot of people think of combat when thinking of Hollow Knight and Silksong, but traversal and exploration are at the top of my favorite list for both games. Silksong capitalizes on the very rewarding exploration of the first entry by giving player hordes of collectibles, side quests, and lore entries to chase in this delightfully dank world. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes a complicated pathway leads to simply an NPC or a small lore entry. The world building achieved in exploration is top tier and equally met by the laundry list of items and tools to collect along your journey. On that path, a delightful and eerie cast of NPCs drove the world and storytelling forward. I found myself eager to meet my next companion and weary of deranged characters I was unsure if they'd end up as a foe. Silksong weaves some phenomenal writing and storytelling into what feels like the most banal moments, and these moments are oftentimes totally missable. Help a bug escape prison? That could be your only conversation with them. Come back after further exploration and story progression and learn about a heartbreaking tale of love lost. Within this same praise comes some necessary criticism. Hollow Knight had a series of extra quests that urged players through the world naturally and remained engaging from start to finish. Silksong has a plethora of side quests that, while many are fun, I found myself pretty surprised by the number of fetch quests and tedious time sink quests there actually were. These were quests that made you collect a certain number of an object and return them to the wish board or the wish giver. It's just surprising to see a game that's so intimately crafted with environments and characters that inspire actual exploration, falling back on one of the oldest and oftentimes most boring mechanics and quest structures in games. They just didn't serve the purpose I think they were intending. I already was going to touch every piece of this game. I didn't need a quest to pull me around. I would have just rather seen those quest rewards littered into the environment naturally. Team Cherry cranked the difficulty up for Silksong, no ifs, ands, or buts. They looked at the fact that Hornet was just an overall better warrior, and they infused that into the intelligence of all the enemies. The enemies are just sadistic. That's not even exclusive to bosses. There are some walkbacks that I've died on more times than I die at bosses because some of the pesky enemies that feel like Team Cherry reworked until they knew how people would react and get killed by them.
I know my behavior can be erratic sometimes.
Most flying enemies just seem to know when you're gonna jump at them and just spit some stupid nut or bile at you. I think of the reprisal of Savage Beastfly. The flying enemies that it summoned shot fireballs that would do 2 masks of damage. Couple that with all the bosses dealing 2 masks, that fight left me reeling more times than I care to admit. Speaking of 2 masks of damage, while I recognize some people don't jive with it, 2 mask hits from bosses makes a lot of sense with what clearly feels like the desire to elevate the threat of high-level enemies. But I won't deny that enemies walking into you and dealing 2 masks feels cheap. Silksong bosses are incredibly threatening with adaptive movement to Hornet, but when you can only take 3 hits most of the game, the sensation is elevated. Is that artificial difficulty inflation? Sure, there's a case for that, but I don't necessarily think it feels oppressive. I will follow that by saying some of the bench positions and false benches in Silksong border unnecessarily cruel. I found myself in a couple scenarios where in traversal or a boss fight saying, this feels designed to be cruel, versus in Hollow Knight, things feeling designed very well, but felt challenging by its great design. I think there is enough chatter online to acknowledge sometimes Silksong does seem unfair, which definitely opens a conversation about when is difficulty good design versus punishing your players for playing your game. For me personally, I'll always land in the good game design camp for 95% of Silksong, but a bench can sometimes just be a bench, guys.
Not this time.
Finally, one of my biggest gripes with Silksong is a gripe I have with many platformer games. That is the reliance of wall climb or wall jump and double jumping being an ability we unlock. I'm not dinging Silksong for this as the torchbearer for this concept, but it just seems like an easy gimmick ability that forces us to go back through the game when we have this newfound ability to comb everything over again. All in all, Team Cherry absolutely cooked Silksong's gameplay. A rich world full of goodies to find and enemies to conquer, with a wide array of crests and tools that augment Hornet's combat, mixed with a beautiful arsenal of movement abilities. Silksong capitalizes on the unbelievable foundation of Hollow Knight and only elevates the experience in just about every other way. With only a handful of gripes, Silksong feels like a game that was intimately crafted, and the team took every moment to make sure the game felt tuned and ready for players to devour. If this was based entirely on the audio and visual department, the scale would likely be 15 out of 10. But the world of Farloom is top 5 of the most spectacular environments in a platforming game, and easily amongst the best of the best in gaming. There are so many details it's hard to keep up with, but speaking on the narrative earlier, Silksong oftentimes recognizes the art of the world as your reward for complex traversal and boss fights.
Dear God, it's beautiful.
Silksong, very similar to Hollow Knight, juxtaposes the absolute decrepit and dank with the lush and vibrant, but Silksong seems to dance in the grim far more than the delight. The moss-covered grotto at the start of the game seems to be one of the more serene environments. As you reach closer to the pilgrimage site of the Citadel, we see a rise of grandiose and eloquent cathedral-style architecture twisted with a Baroque darkness that highlights the later half of the second act. Hollow Knight's aesthetic is complemented by its incredibly designed enemies. Over 200 enemies in Silksong provide a threatening challenge, but each of their designs are unique and highlight the environments they inhabit. Team Cherry has done an incredible job of making unique bosses both mechanically and visually. The bugs of Farloom range from the extravagant to the morbid, and I just appreciate how they've continued to make the visual husk of a bug interesting. This go around, they seem to have leaned heavily into the cogwork, kind of steampunk aesthetic, and I think it works really well within the walls of the Citadel. Couple that with one of the best soundtracks of the year and unbelievable sound design, Silksong is a juggernaut in terms of art direction. I genuinely think best soundtrack of the year will be Silksong or Expedition 33. I don't want to discount the great music of the year from other games, but these two games deliver musical arrangements you'd expect to find in epic major motion pictures. The music is only supported by the incredible sound design found throughout Farloom. I found myself enamored in the Bellheart, running back and forth through the pile of bells, Hornet's little feet clinking and jingling with every step, and the sound increasing as you begin to run. Silksong's soundstage must have been a blast because the overwhelming number of squelches, atrocious wrenching, metal clashes, and cog clangs fills the space in a game where the voice cast consists mostly of grunts and vocalizations. Silksong uses sound in a ton of dynamic ways, such as nails clashing against weapons, and those echoing in more open spaces, juxtaposed to the muted sounds of more claustrophobic environments. Everything Hornet interacts with is alive with sound, and it's truly amazing to just sit and listen to the gnashing of bugs mixed with the intense gusts of wind. The art teams worked in harmony with Silksong, delivering a triumph for Team Cherry and an awe-inspiring piece of work to the gaming community. I have to repeat myself. Silksong is a triumph for Team Cherry. 7 long years and a monolith title to follow up, I knew Silksong would be good, and it's so important to remind that this game was $20. It's unbelievable that so many of the best games of the year have been under $50. Taking its small price tag into consideration, without mincing words, Silksong has a huge barrier of entry. It is unforgiving and extremely tough. As a platforming fiend, I struggled in many places in the combat and thought maybe this isn't a game for me more times than I care to admit. However, I crossed the finish line at 54 hours, missing only 2 trophies PSN has left for me. I scraped every surface and kept coming back for more, even when I found myself losing hope with some of the boss fights or enemy arenas. I think there are elements of Hollow Knight that are senselessly cruel. I found some of the lack of benches and runbacks as an unnecessary time sink in a game that naturally draws the player in for a long time. Couple that with a few gimmick side quests and fetch quests that serve really no purpose but to prolong my time in the game, I found some parts of Silksong tedious. But I hope you've heard my small amount of gripes as merely a blip on the radar of what is an overall sensational game. Silksong is aggressive and fast, filled with mountains of puzzles, collectibles, enemies to conquer, and a sense of wide-open exploration. Silksong is tighter than its predecessor, and in the process, more unforgiving. I don't think this game is for everyone, but for everyone who does experience Silksong, prepare for an unbelievable challenge, but a rewarding experience that will pull you through a whimsically dark world filled with amazing characters, combat, and nooks and crannies to explore for hours. Hollow Knight Silksong lands an impressive 9.5 out of 10 for me. I think its difficulty makes this hard to give a solid 10, and some of the choices seem like a few steps back from its predecessor. But ultimately, the gains it achieved makes the small hiccups feel like an afterthought to one of the best games of the year. Thank you so much for your time, like and subscribe. Didn't agree with my take? Let me know in the comments, I always love a good discourse. Take care and until next time.